Welcome back, everyone. We're diving right into today's explainer, and we are focusing on an absolute game changer for surviving the academic world. We're unpacking Lesson 50, adapting to different lecture styles. So whether you're dealing with a professor who literally never leaves their podium, or one who's constantly throwing questions at you, we are going to build a tactical toolkit to make sure you capture exactly what you need every single time.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a note-taking survival guide, learn about identifying the lecture style, look at the stationary monologue lecture, then the highly interactive lecture. Finally, we'll put together your universal toolkit and talk about what's your next move.
Seriously, think back for a second. Have you ever just drowned in a sea of lecture notes? You know the feeling. Pen flying across the page, or fingers just mashing the keyboard, and you still feel completely overwhelmed? You're trying to catch every single word, tripping over new vocabulary, and suddenly, boom, you're completely lost. It's so frustrating, right? Well, you're definitely not alone. This usually happens because we're acting like passive transcribers instead of active listeners.
So let's get into part 1, the note-taking survival guide. Which brings us to part 2, identifying the lecture style.
The biggest hurdle we face as students is that, well, every single lecturer has a completely different vibe, right? A one-size-fits-all note-taking approach just doesn't cut it. Based on our source material, let's visually split the room and look at two main extremes. On one side, you've got the hour-long monologue. Picture the stationary speaker, maybe rigidly reading from a script or staring at their slides, hardly even looking at the audience. And then, on the flip side, we have the interactive seminar. This speaker is dynamic. They are forcing audience participation, throwing out questions, and deliberately interrupting their own flow. You've got to adjust your strategy drastically depending on who's standing at the front of the room.
Let's zoom in on part 3, the stationary monologue lecturer.
Let's unpack this first archetype, the professor who parks themselves at a desk and just talks for an hour straight. In our source material, a student named Diana describes this perfectly. She actually uses the lack of visual engagement to her advantage. She says, and I love this quote, "You have to get out of this, meditation nirvana process that you're really enjoying." When the professor isn't moving, Diana literally tunes out all the surrounding noise. She hones in entirely on the professor's voice, entering this state of deep, focused concentration. It's almost like a trance.
But contrast that with another experience Diana had, this time with a Dr. John Thompson, who taught publishing. Now, he brought a Kindle to class, threw up visual examples, and paced around the room constantly. But Diana points out that this movement didn't distract her either. So what's the real lesson here? Basically, if you lock your focus intensely onto the content of what's being said, all that physical movement, or the total lack of it, kind of just fades away. It's all about extreme auditory focus.
But wait, if a lecturer is glued to their podium and isn't using any body language, how on earth do you know what to write down? Enter your new secret weapon, spoken punctuation. By definition, these are the vocal cues that effective speakers use to signal something important when their physical gestures just aren't doing the job. When a speaker is physically rigid, you have to shift 100% of your attention to the nuances of their voice.
There are 3 specific oral cues you need to train your ear to catch. First up is stress, literally emphasizing key words. A lecturer might lean into a phrase and say, "This is of particular relevance." Second is falling intonation. This is a noticeable drop in pitch that signals the end of a thought, letting you know a complete concept has just landed. And third, pausing, taking a deliberate breath before and after critical ideas. If a stationary lecturer actually pauses, that's your golden ticket. It's your cue to think ahead, predict, and jot down the core concept they just handed you.
Moving on to part 4, the highly interactive lecturer.
Now this is a completely different ballgame. This type of lecturer purposely derails their own flow to make you participate. There's this brilliantly self-aware quote from Dr. Kathleen Quinlan in our source text. She actually tells her students, "If all you did was listen to my voice for an hour, I would be waking you up to leave the room at the end." I mean, how honest is that? Interactive speakers break the mold on purpose because they know passive listening equals totally checking out. So they weave in reflection prompts to make sure you are actively processing things, not just letting the words wash over you.
Okay, so how do you take notes for this style? It's a 3-step process. Step 1, spot the visual prompt. Dr. Quinlan, for instance, uses red print and massive red question marks on her slides. Step 2, hit pause on your standard transcription. Just stop trying to frantically record facts for a second. Step 3, write personal responses to the reflection question. Guys, the lecturer is giving you a total gift here. They are pausing the fire hose of information so you can actually evaluate the ideas, connect the dots, and write down your own critical thoughts.
This right here, this is active note-taking at its absolute best.
Let's switch gears to Part 5, your universal toolkit.
Whether you're dealing with the human statue or the highly interactive pacing professor, there are foundational tactics that will massively speed up your note-taking. The ultimate golden rule? Focus strictly on content words. We're talking nouns, verbs, and adjectives. These are the heavy lifters. They carry the actual meaning. You've got to train yourself to drop the grammatical fluff. Ditch the determiners like an, and the. Skip the auxiliary verbs like is and have. Remember, you are not writing an essay. You're sketching a map of concepts. Sticking to short, punchy noun phrases is going to save you a ton of time and cognitive energy.
And a huge piece of this is adopting a standard system of abbreviations and symbols, straight from our academic source material. Instead of writing out leg to or causes, literally just draw an arrow. Swap the same as for a quick equals sign. Scribble imp instead of important. When you combine dropping all that grammatical fluff with these standardized symbols, it's a total game changer. You go from being a frantic transcriber to a highly efficient information processor. And the best part? It actually frees up your brain power so you can, listen to the lecture.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 6. What's your next move?
We've covered a ton of ground today. We explored how to read the room, how to listen for spoken punctuation, how to tackle interactive prompts, and how to use a universal toolkit for speed. Now I want you to take a second and really reflect on your current habits. Are you a passive transcriber, just absorbing what you hear and writing it down without evaluating it? Or are you an active listener, someone who evaluates, thinks critically about the utility of the information, and actively adapts your strategy to whoever is speaking? True learning means actively processing the information, finding your own voice, and making sure your notes hit those 3 C's: clarity, comprehensibility, and completeness.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Next time you take a seat in a lecture hall and the professor steps up to the mic, are you just going to be listening, desperately hoping to catch every word? Or will you be adapting? Because now you've got the toolkit. You know how to evaluate their style, catch those subtle vocal cues, and capture exactly what you need. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for today's explainer, and definitely try out these strategies in your very next lecture. Happy note-taking.